You know that moment when you realize someone has pushed you too far? Well, mine came at 2:30 in the morning when I heard a woman screaming in the street. But before I tell you about that night, let me take you back 3 months to when my new neighbor moved in next door. His name was Derek, and he was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Because what started as a simple parking dispute ended with me completely destroying his romantic evening, costing him hundreds of dollars, and honestly, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But here's where it gets interesting. The woman he was trying to impress that night. She ended up knocking on my door the next day. And what she told me made this whole situation even more satisfying than I could have ever imagined. Before we dive into this wild story, if you love tales of satisfying revenge and people finally getting what they deserve, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for sour revenge stories, because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's get into it. So let me paint you a picture of where I live. I'm Sarah, 42 years old, divorced for about 5 years now, and I work as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. I do 12-hour shifts, which means I'm often leaving for work at 5:30 in the morning or coming home completely exhausted after a night shift. I've lived in my little townhouse for almost 15 years. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, and I've worked hard to make it a peaceful sanctuary. Each townhouse in our row has a small driveway that fits 1 car, maybe 2 if you really squeeze. My driveway is technically shared access, meaning the edge of it connects to the sidewalk that everyone uses, but the actual driveway space, that's 100% mine. I even checked with the homeowners association when I first moved in because I'm the type of person who likes to know exactly where the boundaries are. For 14 years, I had the sweetest elderly couple living next door. Margaret and Tom were absolute treasures. They'd wave every morning. Tom would help me shovel snow in the winter, and Margaret would bring over her famous apple crisp every Thanksgiving. When they decided to move to Florida to be closer to their grandchildren, I was genuinely sad to see them go. Then Derek moved in. From day one, I should have known we'd have problems. He was 32, worked in tech something or other, always bragging about his startup and his crypto investments. Fine, whatever. You do you. But he had this attitude about him like he was doing the neighborhood a favor by living there. He drove a flashy silver BMW that he clearly thought was the most impressive thing on 4 wheels. The first week was relatively quiet. We exchanged polite hellos. I even brought over some homemade cookies as a welcome gesture, because that's what Margaret would have done, and I believe in keeping that kind of neighborly tradition alive. He took them with barely a thank you and closed the door. Okay, not everyone is chatty. Get it? Week 2 is when the parking situation started. I came home from a particularly brutal shift at the hospital. We'd had 3 emergency admissions, and I'd been on my feet for 13 straight hours. All I wanted was to pull into my driveway, drag myself inside, and collapse on my couch. But guess what was blocking half of my driveway? Derek's BMW. Not all the way in my driveway, just positioned in such a way that I couldn't actually pull in without potentially hitting it. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to decide if I had the energy for confrontation. I didn't. So I parked on the street, walked over to his door, and knocked politely. He answered in a tank top and gym shorts, clearly in the middle of playing video games based on the loud explosions I could hear from inside. "Hey, Derek," I said, keeping my voice friendly. "I just got home from work, and your car is blocking my driveway. Would you mind moving it?" He glanced past me at his car, then back at me with this shrug. "Oh yeah, sorry. I'm in the middle of a ranked match. Can you just park on the street for tonight? I'll move it later." I blinked. "Derek, I'd really prefer to park in my own driveway. It'll only take you a minute." He actually sighed like I was inconveniencing him. "Dude, I literally just said I'm in the middle of something. Just park on the street. It's not that big of a deal. Then he closed the door. Just closed it right in my face. I stood there for a solid 10 seconds, processing what had just happened. Then I went inside, parked on the street, and told myself to let it go. People have bad days. Maybe he'd realize he was rude and it wouldn't happen again. Happened again 3 days later. And then 4 days after that. Each time I'd knock on his door, he'd give me some excuse about being busy or tired or expecting someone, and I'd end up parking on the street. By the 5th time I wasn't asking nicely anymore. "Derek, this is becoming a pattern," I said when he answered the door. "I need you to stop blocking my driveway. I work long hours, and I have every right to park in my own space." He rolled his eyes. Actually rolled his eyes at me like I was his nagging mother. "Bro, you need to chill. Just parking. The street is right there. Why are you being so uptight about this?" "Because it's my driveway," I said, my voice getting firmer. "You have your own parking space. Use it." "My driveway is shorter than yours," he said, which was absolutely ridiculous because they were identical. "My car is longer, and I don't want to risk someone clipping it when they drive by. Your driveway has more clearance from the street." I could not believe what I was hearing. "So your solution is to use my driveway for clearance while your driveway sits empty?" "Exactly," he said, like I'd finally understood his brilliant logic. "See? Problem solved. You're making a big deal out of nothing." That's when I knew I was dealing with someone who genuinely did not care about boundaries, respect, or basic courtesy. Over the next month, Derek's parking situation got progressively worse. He wasn't just occasionally blocking my driveway anymore. He was doing it constantly. And here's the thing that really got under my skin. He had people over all the time. Friends, dates, parties, you name it. And he'd tell them to park wherever they wanted, including in front of my driveway. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find 3 cars partially or completely blocking my driveway. 3. And I had to be at work in 45 minutes for an emergency shift because one of my coworkers had called in sick. I banged on Derek's door so hard I thought my knuckles would bruise. He answered looking hungover, squinting at the sunlight. "What?" "Derek, there are 3 cars blocking my driveway and I need to get to work. Get them moved. Now." He looked past me at the cars and shrugged. "Those are my friends' cars. They're still sleeping. Can you just squeeze by or something?" "No, I cannot just squeeze by. Derek, I am about to be late for work because you and your friends think my property is a public parking lot." Okay, calm down," he said, holding up his hands like I was being hysterical. "I'll text them. They'll move when they wake up." "When they wake up. I need to leave right now." "Well, I don't have their keys, so I don't know what you want me to do about it," he said. His tone making it clear he thought I was being unreasonable. That day, I ended up having to call a taxi to get to work. $45 because my neighbor couldn't respect basic parking rules. I was livid. When I got home that evening, the cars were gone, but there was no apology note, no text, nothing. I went straight to my computer and did what I should have done weeks ago. I looked up the local parking ordinances and my rights as a property owner. Turns out, in our city, if someone blocks your driveway, you have every legal right to have their vehicle towed at the owner's expense. You don't need to warn them. You don't need to give them a chance to move it. If they're on your property or blocking your legal access, one phone call to a towing company and the problem is solved. I saved the number for Fletcher's Towing in my phone. I hoped I wouldn't need it, but I had a feeling Derek wasn't going to change his behavior without serious consequences. I tried talking to him one more time a few days later. I even brought a printed copy of the parking ordinance to show him I was serious. Derek, we need to have a real conversation about this parking situation. I've had to park on the street or call a taxi multiple times now because of you and your guests. I looked up the laws, and if this continues, I have the legal right to have vehicles towed. He barely glanced at the paper I was holding. Are you seriously threatening to tow my car? That's so petty. It's not a threat, it's the reality of the situation. All I'm asking is that you respect my property and park in your own space. He laughed. Actually laughed. You know what your problem is, Sarah? You're miserable. You work too much, you have no life, and you're taking it out on me because I actually know how to have fun. Maybe instead of complaining about parking, you should try loosening up a little. I felt my face get hot. This has nothing to do with my personal life, and everything to do with you being inconsiderate. Sure, whatever helps you sleep at night, he said dismissively. I'm not going to walk on eggshells in my own home because you're uptight about parking. Deal with it. Then he went inside and cranked up his music loud enough that I could hear it through the walls. That night I made a decision. The next time Derek or any of his guests blocked my driveway, I wasn't going to knock on his door. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to make one phone call, and he was going to learn a very expensive lesson about respecting other people's property. I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, on a Friday evening, I was off work and actually had plans. My sister was visiting from out of state, and we were meeting for dinner at this lovely Italian restaurant downtown. I was running right on schedule, had my makeup done, was wearing my favorite dress. I was actually excited for a nice evening out for once. I grabbed my keys and opened my front door, and my stomach dropped. Derek's BMW was parked at an angle across my entire driveway. Not just blocking it, completely across it, like he'd tried to park horizontally in a vertical space. I looked over at Derek's townhouse and could see him through his front window. He was dressed nicely for once, in a button-down shirt, and he appeared to be frantically cleaning his living room. I could see him stuffing things into closets and spraying air freshener. In that moment, I knew exactly what was happening. Derek had a date coming over. And he'd parked his car like an absolute maniac because he was too busy trying to make his place presentable to care about anyone else. Checked my watch. I needed to leave in 10 minutes or I'd be late meeting my sister. I thought about my options. I could go knock on his door and probably get into another argument that would make me late anyway. I could call my sister and reschedule, which I really didn't want to do since she was only in town for the weekend. Or I could make the phone call I'd been preparing to make for weeks. I pulled out my phone and dialed Fletcher's Towing. Fletcher's Towing, this is Mike speaking. Hi Mike. I have a vehicle blocking my driveway at 247 Maple Street, and I need it towed immediately. I'm the property owner, and I need to leave for an appointment. Yes ma'am, we can have someone there in about 20 minutes. Can you describe the vehicle? It's a silver BMW, newer model, license plate. I walked closer to read it off to him. Got it. And you're the property owner requesting the tow? Yes, I am. I have documentation if needed. That's fine, ma'am. We'll be there shortly. The vehicle will be towed to our lot on Industrial Boulevard. The owner can retrieve it by paying the towing fee and storage. How much does that usually run? Base tow is $275, plus $50 for the first day of storage if they don't pick it up right away. I smiled. Thank you, Mike. I'll be watching for your truck. I hung up and felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. No yelling, no arguments, no banging on doors. Just a simple business transaction that was about to teach Derek the lesson he'd refused to learn the easy way. I went back inside and watched through my window. About 18 minutes later, a massive red tow truck rumbled down our street. The driver, presumably Mike, got out with a clipboard. I stepped outside. "Hi, are you the property owner?" he asked. "I am." "That's the vehicle right there." I pointed at the BMW. He walked around it, took some photos, and got to work. I'm not a car person, but watching him efficiently hook up Derek's precious BMW was oddly therapeutic. The whole process took maybe 10 minutes. Right as the tow truck was lifting the BMW off the ground, Derek's front door flew open. "Wait, what are you doing? That's my car." He came running out in his nice shirt and dress pants, waving his arms at the tow truck driver. Mike, bless him, barely looked up. Vehicle was blocking a driveway. Property owner requested a tow. Derek spun around and saw me standing on my porch. His face went from confused to absolutely furious in about half a second. "You called a tow truck on my car. Are you insane?" I kept my voice calm and even. "You were blocking my driveway, Derek. I asked you repeatedly not to do that. I told you I'd have your car towed if it continued. You chose not to listen. I was only going to be here for a few hours. I have a date coming over. That's not my problem. You have your own driveway. You chose to block mine." The tow truck driver secured the final chain. "Sir, if you want to discuss this further, you can come down to our lot. The address is on this card." He handed Derek a business card. "We close at 9 tonight, reopen at 8 tomorrow morning." "This is theft. You can't just take my car." "It's not theft, sir. It's a legal tow requested by the property owner. You can pick up your vehicle by paying the towing and storage fees." "How much is that going to cost?" $275 for the tow, $50 for storage if you don't get it tonight. I watched Derek's face cycle through about 15 different emotions. Then he turned back to me. "You're really going to do this? Right now?" "I told you I have someone coming over. And I have somewhere to be as well," I said. "The difference is, I'm trying to leave from my own driveway, which you block. Again." "I will pay you," he said desperately. "Right now. Just tell him to put my car down." "No. Sarah, come on. You had dozens of chances to not let it come to this, Derek. You were rude, dismissive, and entitled every single time I tried to address this respectfully. This is the consequence of your choices." The tow truck driver climbed into his cab. "Have a good evening, folks." And with that, he drove away with Derek's BMW hoisted in the air behind him. Derek stood in the street, watching his car disappear around the corner. Then he pulled out his phone and frantically started making calls. I assumed he was either calling the towing company to yell at them or calling an Uber to try to get to the lot before they closed. I got in my car, parked in my own driveway, imagine that, and headed to dinner with my sister. The entire drive there, I kept replaying the look on Derek's face when he realized his car was actually being towed. The panic, the anger, the absolute disbelief that someone had finally stood up to him. I met my sister at the restaurant, and before we even ordered drinks, I told her the whole story. She nearly fell out of her chair laughing. "Sarah, I'm so proud of you," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "You're usually such a people pleaser. I can't believe you actually did that." "I know, right? But honestly, I'm so tired of entitled people thinking they can just do whatever they want with no consequences." "How much did you say the tow costs?" $275 plus $50 if he doesn't get it tonight. She raised her wine glass. "Worth every penny." His penny, technically. We had a wonderful dinner, and I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. When I pulled back onto my street around 9:30, I half expected to see Derek's BMW back in his driveway. But no, his driveway was empty. The lights were on in his townhouse, though, so he was definitely home. I parked again in my own driveway and went inside. I'd barely kicked off my shoes when I heard raised voices from next door. Derek was arguing with someone. A woman, from the sound of it. Now, I'm not one to eavesdrop normally, but our walls are pretty thin, and they were being loud. Told you I'd be right back. That was Derek. You were gone for almost 3 hours, Derek. The woman's voice was shrill with anger. I showed up, you weren't here, and when you finally answered your phone, you told me you were at a towing company. It wasn't my fault. My psycho neighbor had my car towed. That's the most ridiculous excuse I've ever heard. If you weren't interested, you could have just canceled the date. I'm not lying. She actually called a tow truck because I parked in her driveway. You parked in someone else's driveway before a first date? What is wrong with you? There was more yelling, then I heard his front door slam. Through my window, I saw a very attractive woman in a red dress storming down the sidewalk toward a Honda Civic, her heels clicking angrily against the pavement. She got in and drove off with a screech of tires. I shouldn't have felt as gleeful as I did, but after months of Derek's entitlement and rudeness, seeing his date fall apart because of his own actions was immensely satisfying. About 10 minutes later, there was aggressive pounding on my door. I looked through the peephole and sure enough it was Derek. He looked furious. I opened the door but kept the chain lock on. What can I do for you, Derek? You ruined my life tonight. I had your illegally parked car towed. That's not ruining your life, that's enforcing basic property rights. That date was important. I've been talking to that girl for 3 weeks. And now she thinks I'm a liar and a loser because you couldn't just let me park there for a few hours. Derek, how many times do I have to explain this? It's not your parking spot. You don't get to decide when you can use my property based on what's convenient for you. It cost me $325 to get my car back, plus the Uber to get there. Do you have any idea how insane that is? I do, actually. It's exactly the price point that might finally teach you to respect other people's boundaries. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're seriously proud of yourself right now? You screwed up my entire evening and cost me hundreds of dollars, and you think you're in the right? Yes, I said simply. Because I warned you. Multiple times. I tried being nice. I tried being firm. I even showed you the legal ordinance. You laughed at me and told me to loosen up. So now you've learned the expensive way that actions have consequences. I'm going to report you to the Homeowners Association. For what? Having a vehicle towed that was illegally blocking my property. By all means, go ahead. I have documentation of every time I asked you to move your car. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. You're a miserable person, you know that? And you're a child who never learned to respect other people. Good night, Derek. I closed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking. I'm not usually one for confrontation, but I felt good. Really good. The next morning I was having coffee on my front porch when a silver Honda Civic pulled up. The same one from last night that had peeled out after Derek's date. The woman from the red dress got out, only now she was wearing jeans and a sweater, and she looked a lot calmer than she had sounded yesterday. She walked right up to my porch. "Are you Sarah?" she asked. I tensed up, not sure if she was here to yell at me too. "I am. I'm Jessica. I was Derek's." Well, I guess now it's fair to say I was supposed to be Derek's date last night. "Oh," I said carefully. "I'm sorry if I caused any problems for you." She laughed, and it wasn't a mean laugh. It was almost relieved. "No, actually, I wanted to thank you. That was not what I expected." "Thank me. Can I sit?" She gestured to my porch steps. "Sure, of course." She sat down and sighed. After I left last night, I was so angry. I'd gotten all dressed up, done my makeup, driven 40 minutes to get here. And then he wasn't even there, and when he finally showed up, he had this whole story about a towing situation that sounded like complete nonsense. It wasn't nonsense, I said quietly. He really did block my driveway, and I really did have his car towed. I know that now, she said. After I left, I couldn't sleep. Something about the whole situation felt off. So I did something probably a little crazy. I looked you up on Facebook. I raised my eyebrows. I know, total stalker move. But I found your profile and you seem like a normal person. Pictures of you with family, posts about your work at the hospital, volunteering at the animal shelter. You didn't seem like the type to randomly ruin someone's evening for fun. So then I looked Derek up. And I found his ex-girlfriend's Facebook. Her profile is public. Sarah, she has an entire album called Derek's Greatest Hits that's just screenshots of text messages and stories about terrible things he did during their relationship. Parking in her mother's driveway during a family dinner and refusing to move. Blocking her friend's car in at a party. Lying about why he was late to things. The pattern is clear as day. I felt a weird sense of validation hearing this. He told me I was uptight and needed to loosen up. Jessica snorted. Yeah, that tracks. In our 3 weeks of messaging, he must have mentioned his BMW about 50 times. How expensive it was, how he was so careful about where he parked it. And then he just parks it in someone else's driveway without asking. That says everything about his character. I tried talking to him nicely so many times, I said. I really did. I believe you. And honestly, you saved me from what would have been a disaster of a relationship. Can you imagine being with someone that self-centered? He shuddered. So thank you. Sincerely. We talked for a few more minutes, and she ended up giving me her number. If he gives you any more trouble, let me know. I have some pretty tech-savvy friends who might be able to make his life interesting if he decides to be vindictive. After she left, I felt even better about the whole situation. Not only had I stood up for myself, but I'd inadvertently saved someone else from a bad relationship. The next few weeks were blissfully quiet. Derek's car was always in his own driveway. He didn't have any more big parties. When we'd see each other outside, he'd just glare and go back inside. Then, about a month after the towing incident, I came home from a night shift to find a for sale sign in Derek's front yard. I ran into his realtor a few days later while getting my mail. "Oh, are you the neighbor?" she asked cheerfully. Derek mentioned there was a parking dispute. "Something like that," I said diplomatically. "Well, between you and me," she said, lowering her voice. "He also mentioned that he got a new job in California and needs to move quickly. But he seemed pretty eager to leave." Derek moved out 3 weeks later. I watched from my window as the moving truck pulled away, his BMW following behind it. The new neighbors who moved in 2 months later were a lovely couple in their 30s with a golden retriever named Biscuit. First thing they said to me, "Don't worry, we'll never block your driveway. We hate when people do that." So that's the story of how I ruined my neighbor's Tinder date by towing his car. Some people have told me I was too harsh, that I should have given him one more chance. But here's what I learned from this whole experience. Some people will never respect your boundaries until there are real consequences. Derek had months to change his behavior. He had dozens of polite conversations, clear warnings, and even legal documentation explaining why what he was doing was wrong. He chose to ignore all of it because he didn't think I'd actually follow through. The towing cost him $325, his dignity, and possibly a relationship. But you know what? He never blocked my driveway again. Not once in the entire month before he moved out. Was it petty? Maybe. Was it satisfying? Absolutely. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Because at the end of the day, standing up for yourself isn't about being mean or getting revenge. It's about teaching people that you won't be a doormat, that your time and property matter just as much as theirs, and that there are consequences for treating people poorly. Derek probably tells this story differently. I'm sure in his version, I'm the unreasonable neighbor who overreacted to a simple parking situation. But that's fine. I know the truth. Jessica knows the truth. And now you know the truth. So the next time someone repeatedly disrespects your boundaries and tells you to just loosen up or stop being uptight, remember this story. Remember that you have every right to enforce your boundaries, and you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, Derek learned something from this experience. Maybe he thinks twice before parking in someone else's spot now. Maybe he's a little more considerate of his neighbors. Or maybe he's in California telling people about his crazy neighbor back east who towed his car. Either way, my driveway stays clear, and I sleep soundly at night knowing I stood up for myself when it mattered. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this entire story. If you enjoyed hearing about Derek's expensive life lesson, you'll love the other revenge stories on this channel. We've got entitled neighbors, nightmare co-workers, bridezillas who got what they deserved, and so much more. Make sure you're subscribed to Sour Revenge Stories so you never miss an upload. Hit that notification bell too because these stories get juicy and you'll want to be first to hear them. Drop a comment and let me know. Do you think I was justified in towing Derek's car, or should I have given him one more chance? Have you ever had to deal with a nightmare neighbor? I love reading your stories and comments. And if you're dealing with someone who just won't respect your boundaries, take this as your sign to stand up for yourself. Life's too short to let entitled people walk all over you. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next story. Until then, remember, respect is earned, boundaries are necessary, and sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone face the natural consequences of their own actions. Take care, everyone.